Hello everyone, my name is Wayne Supernova and welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. In the last episode, we finished the summation examination, got Madame Tuspells on the stand, and she is saying that she knows the identity of the professor and she has the key to the mask, which will tell us what the true identity of the professor is. Which begs the question, why Drebber wanted to take the lock off of the head, right? Because he already knew who it was. It's very confusing. But I also realized that that the fact that Courtney Stevens' autopsy for the professor said death by hanging confirmed at midnight. And then the autopsy for Odie Asman in this, we've been saying that it's weird that he had a broken neck considering he was inside the bird cage and it hit from feet. It hit from like the foot side of the bottom side of the bird cage is what crashed into the crystal tower, so he shouldn't have had a broken neck. And I noticed this and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Doesn't Odie Asman also have a broken neck? It's so weird to me. And the fact that Courtney Scythe says that it's a broken vertebrae most likely resulting from impact after a sudden fall from considerable height, that's very different. I don't have the medical knowledge of a coroner for stuff like this, but I'd feel like hanging would be a bit different from, oh yeah, I just fell and broke my neck that way. I feel like there would be a pretty considerable difference from that. But they also didn't really let her write down much in this autopsy. It just says death by hanging confirmed at midnight. But then again, I guess you don't need to do much if you were present at the hanging, right? But that, unfortunately, that revelation doesn't really help us with this new statement that we got, because it said it took me a very long time because it was before the onset of rigor mortis. So she targets 3 hours and right after 3 hours, which means if it happened at midnight that she would have had to have done it in between midnight and 2 a.m. Right? But I don't think in her... she does say as dawn approached. That's like 6 a.m. But I can't really present one statement against the next, right? I'll press this and then I'll try and present the autopsy. You say that dawn was approaching. What was the time of day then, approximately?
Well, I could not say, but when I left the cemetery with my utensils and wax, the morning light was becoming visible.
The execution took place on the 17th of June, which had the earliest sunrise of that year. Indeed it did. First light would have been at around 4:40 in the morning. That really is early.
The fact is, I had very little time, so I finished my work in half an hour. It was necessary to complete the impression and bury the body before daybreak, of course. If somebody had discovered me there, it would have been a catastrophe, so I had to hurry.
Is it me, or does Mr. Sholmes seem to be taking shape more quickly now, too? You certainly appear to go to extraordinary lengths for your work, madam. I wonder, is what she just said particularly significant? Oh yeah, it's significant. Madam, those details about how long it took you to complete the sculpture in the early sunrise, could you include them in your testimony? I believe they may be significant.
Of course, if you would like me to. You're quite right, Mr. Naruhodo. It is intriguing. A sunrise at 4 in the morning would be absolutely unimaginable at home, wouldn't it?
That's not quite what I meant by significant. Kindly amend your formal testimony then, madam.
With pleasure, my lord.
Okay. The half hour before sunrise. I think it's this that we want to present on. I'm gonna save, of course. Oh yeah, I should also say, I looked up in between the episodes. I looked up how to pronounce that French C that I didn't know how to do. It's just that's the, so it would be like c'est ça, I guess. Probably not the correct pronunciation to a T, but something like that. Yeah, we want this.
Objection.
Madam Tuspels, I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows.
And is that the problem?
I believe it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another.
Quoi?
I have no idea how to... Quoi? I'm guessing. Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? According to her testimony, Madame Tuspels was creating her wax impression just before dawn, and at that time, rigor mortis had not yet set in. Am I correct so far, madam?
You are, yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaw is the first sign of rigor mortis, 2 or 3 hours after death. But the man's chin was limp, so he cannot have been dead for a long time.
But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Sai's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, 17th of June. No! If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would have already set in.
Oui, yes, you are right. The chin, it would have been completely stiff.
In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection.
No coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible! That's what I was going to go with, yeah. The execution didn't take place at the same time. Order, order! Counsel, this is beyond folly. Not only do you indict the author of the report, Dr. Scythe, but you also implicate members of staff at Barclay Prison where the execution took place. By heck! Extraordinary! Not my day! My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question.
He did. He did. Of course he did. I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was no...
Yes, the professor died that night. But what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What exactly are you suggesting did happen in that case? It's almost impossible to believe, but it would explain the link between Dr. Scythe, the professor, and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night. Counsel, present the evidence at once! The evidence that allegedly explains what really happened on the night of the professor's execution. I see what we're doing here. We are going to say that this happened. And the bullet happened and he was shot and killed there.
Take that!
What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. Executed criminal returns in the dead of night at local cemetery. You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now? Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from his grave and was killed again.
Objection!
Don't be a fool. That's simply a rumor published by the gutter press. Can you be certain of that? Are you serious? The point is, as the article says, there was a witness to what happened. My word, yes indeed.
Oui. The young man who stole into the cemetery by chance that night.
Objection!
Of course there was a witness. The story didn't write itself, but obviously the man made it all up. And in any case, this was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding him. On the contrary, my lord, we all know this witness well. What? Are you suggesting, counsel, that you've identified the person in question? That you know who claims to have seen the utterly incredible events take place? Yes, my lord. In fact, you could say that he's right here before my very eyes. You will substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel. Who is the alleged witness of the staggering scene from the cemetery 10 years ago? I would think it would be Odie Asman, right? I'm gonna save, though. Because it says he's here in the courtroom right now. Which is wild.
Take that!
That's probably wrong. I must say, I'm quite staggered by the scene I see before me now, counsel. That of a young man with his eyes tightly shut, clearly pointing out a person at random. At least have the decency to open your eyes and face the result of your blunder, for heaven's sake. Okay, so they're probably going to say it's Tuspels.
And you should keep your eyes open when you collapse on the bench like that too, for safety's sake.
I'll bear it in mind. I'll take the L on that one. You will substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel. It was Iris. She probably wasn't even born yet. Probably to spells then, right?
Take that!
Nope. Interesting. I don't want to save. I want to load. I was going to take the L on it, but... Interesting, interesting, interesting. Oh, I think I'm getting too far ahead of myself. I think they're just saying Enoch Drebber. Right?
Take that!
Yeah, okay. I was getting way too far ahead of myself there. The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drebber. Drebber? The previous witness? The special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Tuspel's Museum of Waxwork recreates that decade-old scene in great detail. The condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drebber. He didn't stumble in on it, though. It's ridiculous for you to say that they stumbled in on it. I mean, he had the shovel. You know what's even weirder to me, though? How old is... I want to see how old Tuspels is, because she can't be more than 20-something, right? Yeah, 26. So she would have been 16 at the time. So she would have been, like, a high schooler. Surely not, counsel. Drebber was there? In Lowgate Cemetery?
What is all this talk about Mr. Drebber? Is the name significant?
Of course, Madame Tuspels doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, madam. To your situation as well, in fact.
What situation?
The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetrated by the very same man.
None! But that would mean...
Madame Tuspels. It would appear you know the name Enoch Drebber.
Oui, yes, I know it. But from long ago in the past.
What?
Oh my!
Good gracious. Explain yourself. Tell us everything you know.
Yes, yes, of course.
Well, I know this. I mean, I already surmised this.
The story of the young man and the terrible sight he witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However, in all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. The Daily Circus. It is the paper from which comes the article I have already shown in court.
You're saying that his full name was only publicized in that article? Goodness me! Yes, here it is. The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drebber, a disciple of science at the University of London and a resident of its student dorms. Unbelievable.
When I read the article, I went to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in the cemetery in the dead of night would make a perfect exhibit for my House of Horrors, whether it was the truth or not.
I see. So you went to meet Mr. Drebber in order to sculpt a waxwork of the man, did you?
Exactamente. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him £5 to model for the waxwork. And since that time, it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of terror from the cemetery.
So that's interesting. So you're saying that you and him weren't in the cemetery at the same time? That they were two separate events? I didn't think that was the case at all. I thought that he was the grave digger and he dug up the grave and you... But she did say that she didn't have an assistant with her at the time, didn't she? So she would have had to have dug it up herself. Oh, I don't know. I'm so confused. We getting the white flashes. So, 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he'd witnessed. A criminal who had been put to death re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. But the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote that was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to use as a body double for the victim in the case we're discussing here today. Even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim, and its face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? Which brings us to 3 days ago when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asmund, but that same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated, Dr. Scythe, would have noticed immediately. And yet she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court has seen earlier. Why? Because the waxwork was that of the professor. Is that what you're saying? Dr. Scythe put her name to a document confirming the death of a condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. But that misconduct was a deadly secret that the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used that particular waxwork as the body double. Ugh! You know who I bet shot the professor re-emerging from his grave? Von Zieks. I bet he was fucking pissed. My lord, this court must summon Dr. Scythe to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected. But according to the missive I received this morning through the prosecutor's office, Dr. Scythe is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case?
She told us so herself, didn't she? Lord Van Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Stronhart has forbidden it.
Lord Stronhart?
The Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case, but please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me.
Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago, and surely nobody would want to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped! Oh, shit. But, my Lord Van Zieks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
Objection!
I don't give a damn! The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me.
Yes!
Let Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe both take the stand together. Order, order, order! Very well, I will uphold your request. Bailiff, send a subpoena with immediate effect, addressed to Dr. Scythe of the Forensic Investigation Team. The woman is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders. Alright then, Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could have never been committed. Just a stone's throw away. I can feel it. The truth behind all of this is about to come out. Oh, she's there too still. Okay. Thank you for your attendance at such short notice, Dr. Scythe.
I'm disappointed in you, Lord Van Zieks. You've completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office.
Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. If it is, if there's even a hint of wrongdoing, then no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt. Mr. Drebber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. And Dr. Scythe, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime.
And where's your evidence?
At present, we have no definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago.
You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes, and officially pronounced him dead.
That remains to be seen.
Is that so?
According to newspaper reports from the time on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life.
Don't waste my time.
And the sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drebber, wasn't it? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction, but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Scythe's. A secret so profound it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme, in fact. Did Mr. Drebber tell the court, tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night in Lowgate Cemetery?
So he was the student who saw it.
You can see the resemblance, actually, can't you? With the ma'am and Madame Dispels, I mean. Surely he's not going to claim that that's really what he saw, especially not after all these years.
He was a research student at the University of London, wasn't he?
And a bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me. What an interesting twist. when at the time not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are, 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters, and in a court of law too. Very well then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank, I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night, for what it's worth. I feel like there's going to be a lot of pursuing and conflicting accounts from both of these people in this testimony. So, Mr. Drebber, your testimony, please, about the events of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgate Cemetery. Yes, of course, as you wish. Years earlier. The reason I was in Lowgate Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor. Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article. Oh, really? Wait a minute. You're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now? Of course. You'd have to have a screw loose if you believed a corpse could come back from the dead. But, so you're actually saying this article is not worth the paper it's printed on? I think that would describe it perfectly, yes. Ah! If the details in the article aren't true, it nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Scythe would have been working together. So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument? Tell me, witness, you claim to have been in the cemetery on some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate? That's right. Grave robbing, to be precise. As you know, Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison. So among students at the university, it had a reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. Grave robbing, you say? Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead. So you were one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society. Actually, my fellows and I went by another name, the repurposers. That is quite beyond the pale. You would invite divine retribution, sir. Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with the bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add. I see. Out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article? Yes, that was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done. Claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish. Very foolish. Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now. So Odie Asman was a reporter, was he? It's very interesting. We already had a reporter who was actually a murderer earlier on in this game.
Hold it!
Okay, so time to do the pressing. By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, do you? Surely you only need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that. The lantern and spade. But who on earth would want to buy a dead body? Any major hospital. A hospital?
In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science. But there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with. Though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means. As aspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we made surreptitious arrangements with a hospital via some of our medical student acquaintances. We would never take anything of value from the graves. This was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we all told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand.
You realize body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences.
We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds for research.
Professor Hairbrain said exactly the same. I'm quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you've revealed this abhorrent behavior.
Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. But I never expected it to end the way it did. That I regret to this day.
That's very interesting, actually. It's kind of a realistic sort of take on something so fantastical.
Hold it!
The strange happening at Lowgate Cemetery, which you now deny.
Not entirely. I ran to fetch the police at the time, you know. I was shaking like a leaf. But they didn't believe a word of it. In fact, I was very nearly arrested myself.
So you went to the papers instead.
I started big with the London News, but unsurprisingly, they didn't want to know either. In the end, though, it was reporters from the gossip rags, the gutter press, that came to get my story. And it spread like the plague through the capital as gossip-hungry Londoners lapped up the tale.
The story was in every single paper at the time, with the exception of some broadsheets.
And yet only 2 or 3 of them actually interviewed me personally. Most of the accounts turned out to be very interpretive ghost stories.
What about the article in the Daily Circus?
That particular journalist found me at my dorm. I don't know how, but he discovered my name. So I recounted to him exactly what had happened that night.
And from your description, he drew this illustration?
Precisely. That's how I learned that the condemned man was the infamous Professor. Because the reporter told me so. I had no idea myself, you see.
Newspaper reporters are wont to snoop around in matters that don't concern them. So the scene portrayed in the illustration is accurate then?
Well...
Hold it!
And why do you say that? What are you talking about?
I think I explained already, didn't I? Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison. So it was renowned among us students at the university for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. For some absurd reason, I was scared of the graveyard at night. And as a result, only too willing to believe the nonsense about the dead about the dead coming back to life.
But you said you actually saw it.
I said what I'd seen in my mind's eye. After all, resurrection is impossible, isn't it? You'd have to be unhinged to think otherwise. Unless, of course, you have some evidence that proves I encountered the professor that night.
I don't know. Is there any material evidence that could show he really did see the professor?
If we have anything at all, Mr. Naruhodo.
I know. I need to present it against that irritatingly backtracking statement of his.
The point is, that night was a pivotal moment in my life.
I don't think I have any. So I think I just need to keep pressing.
Hold it!
I can't think of anything that proves that he saw the professor and knows who it is, because we don't even know who it is, right? That young woman being Madame Tuspels, of course.
Precisely. I must say I didn't expect to run into her again like this 10 years later. As I have explained, I went by the name published in the article and, comme ça, I found the man.
Yes, the article in the Daily Circus, I think you said. I was a poor student with barely a penny to my name at the time. And the young lady put £5 in front of me. So you readily consented to having a waxwork of yourself made and gave permission for it to be put on display. I did. I should sell what little I had to sell, I concluded.
Ah, oui, I remember now. I purchased something else from you that day. N'est-ce pas?
Did you? I can't say I remember. What was it, madam?
His camera.
Ah. Oh yes, I made a point of taking it with me whenever I made an excursion into any cemetery. You took a camera with you, sir? To what end? To record the details of the bodies I disinterred. But I had no intention of ever visiting a graveyard again after that night, so I sold it. I see.
But I still have it, monsieur. It is part of the special exhibit in my House of Horrors. I am very meticulous about such details. It is the Tuspel's way. It would seem, then, that this is the very camera Mr. Drebber took with him to Logate Cemetery on the night in question.
Yes, interesting. Oh, interesting, okay. There was blood on it. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist. I never actually saw the professor at all. Is it the camera? I mean, we've already checked the camera, right? It says when the lens is extended, dark staining can be seen on the bellows. The actual camera that Mr. Drebber had with him in the cemetery 10 years ago. We could possibly prove that the quote-unquote professor and the body that was killed, Odie Asman, in this trial are one and the same via Sholmes's sort of little science gun, right? If we are able to check the blood on the camera with the blood that's on the screwdriver, right? We will be able to check that. So we'll see. I've connected those two now, but I don't know if that really proves anything about... I suppose we'll press this, because I want to know more about why he quit becoming a scientist because of it. This article, you mean? Published in the Daily Circus? Yes, somebody informed the dean that it was my name that appeared in the article, and carelessly let slip that night after night I was digging up graves. Hardly a model student, you might say. The university's reputation was inexorably defiled, and I was expelled as a result.
Mon Dieu, I had no idea.
And having been run out of university, you found employment in a somewhat specialist trade. You combined your knowledge of science with knowledge of stage magic to create various experimental machines designed to demonstrate never-before-seen technology. And you used those deceptive machines to trick the government and provide investors into giving you money. Professor Albert Harebrain was just your latest victim, wasn't he? Whatever are you talking about? I have no recollection of doing anything of the sort. And you say nothing, of course. What's Drebber up to? Why would he suddenly change his tune and recant his claim?
I wonder if perhaps it's because his circumstances have changed now.
What circumstances?
Well, if he admits to having seen the professor emerging alive from his grave 10 years ago, it will expose a secret in Dr. Scythe's past that she would desperately want to hide.
Yes, of course. If Drebber and Dr. Scythe are working together now, then if Drebber were to betray her, there would be no reason for her to continue to cooperate. In that case, there's only one way around it. I'll have to prove he really did see it. Prove he really did see the professor's corpse coming back from the dead, as he originally claimed.
Yes, Mr. Naruhodo, exactly.
So how do we prove... Well, let's save real quick here. How do we prove that his ass saw the professor? I would say the camera, right? I mean, like, that's the thing that points... that we just got updated. I mean, we'll try it.
Protection.
It is not the camera. Yep, not the camera. I didn't think it was. I just wanted to throw that one out there in case. But... never actually saw the professor at all. What do we have that proves that he saw the professor? I mean, we already checked everything on this, I think, right? Royal Society Award. I don't think it has anything to do with that. What proves that you saw the professor? This is tough. I actually don't know. Thought it might be the camera, it wasn't. I mean, we would have to prove that he took something from the body, right? He did say he doesn't touch anything in terms of valuables, right? Is it this? I mean, he was wearing the monocle with black glass back then, wasn't he? It looks like it. So I don't think it was the monocle. This is a rough one. Not much in terms of commentary either, because I can't really think of anything. idea. Just gonna start presenting things, I think.
Objection!
Alright, got it. Guessing for the win. Sorry, Mr. Drebber, but I don't believe that. Don't believe what? Your latest claim. You did see the professor on that night 10 years ago. Oh dear, we seem to be at odds. But I was there, and you were not. I know what I didn't see. The illustration with this article was drawn based upon what you told the journalist that you witnessed. A figure emerging from a tomb, wearing an iron mask. Oh, I didn't even notice that he had an iron mask on in that. I just thought that was like a ghoulish zombie-looking head. But I see sort of like bolts on the top of the head, so I guess, but I wouldn't have guessed that. Yes, when the killer was tried 10 years ago, it was decided in the closed court's ruling that the man would wear the mask to hide his identity. It wasn't to be removed even during his execution and subsequent burial. Not even the prison wardens were to see the man's face. But obviously, the provision of this mask was not public knowledge. So, Mr. Drebber, as you've just heard... a lowly student of the University of London certainly wouldn't have known about the condemned man's mask. So unless you'd actually seen the professor that night, it's inconceivable that the artist would have included that mask in the would have included the mask in that illustration. Ugh! Order! Well, Mr. Drebber? It's a vile scene, isn't it, if you look closely? And as I've already been at pains to point out, I was utterly petrified, which is why I had it in my head that I'd seen such a blood-curdling sight. But afterwards I came to my senses and realized that I'd been mistaken. You're still saying you didn't see it? If you're stubbornly sticking to that story, witness, then amend your testimony to explain exactly how you think your eyes deceived you. Of course. Only too happy to oblige. I can't believe he's still not going to concede the point. Especially after it took about 5 minutes for me to figure out what the hell the problem was. And even then I still didn't figure it out, I just guessed. A fellow grave robber. A fellow grave robber? What are you talking about? Well, I wasn't the only one busy in the cemetery that night, you know. Other body snatchers were at work. Of course, when I saw one emerging from the hole he dug, my heart fairly nearly stopped. So that's the terrifying sight I actually saw, you see. You're claiming it was just another student on equally insalubrious business as yourself. Many of the medical students would wear metal masks to protect them from bacteria during dissections. Clearly the fellow was using such a mask to protect his anonymity, wouldn't you say? But there's more to the story, isn't there? The article goes on to say, in the next second, a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more. We might assume that the sexton discovered the miscreants at work, perhaps, and fired upon one of them. If a gravedigger had shot someone in the cemetery, I think it might have been rather big news, my lord. Ah, yes, well... I can only assume it was an embellishment bolted on later by the reporter.
Excuse me!
Uh-oh. Madame Tuspels. Don't take it out on Mr. Sholmes. That's what he's worried about. Oh la la, pardon. I was lost in my thoughts. Would it be fair to say that Mr. Drebber's last remark was significant to you in some way? I thought it was a little strange, that is all. How Monsieur Drebber could claim this now. If you don't mind me saying, madam, What are you talking about?
Well, when I met you 10 years ago at your university dorm, you recounted to me about your adventures in the cemetery, no? Including the gunshot.
Stop! You might want to watch your tongue, you know.
Objection!
Have a care, Drebber. That's no way to speak to a lady. Ugh. Please, Madame Tuspels, carry on.
Of course. According to what Monsieur Drebber told me at the time, he did hear a gunshot from behind him and the bullet hit the condemned man.
I said nothing of the sort!
No, you were very explicit about the details. About the mask that the figure was wearing. And the blood that splattered over you when he was shot.
Enough! Shut up, woman! You're making all this up! That will do. Mr. Drebber. Yes? You refute the account just given by Madame Tuspels? Ooh. I have no recollection of ever saying those things. Come on, do you really expect us to believe you? Control yourself, counsel. I will not permit baseless accusations in my courtroom. Right. Yeah, get a hold of yourself. We got this guy. Under the circumstances, I think it best that you supplement your testimony with a statement to clarify your position on this witness. Very well. And this is where we've gotten him. Yeah, no, we've gotten through the fog. Now we're in the clear. Let's go. Because you absolutely would have had something get the blood on it, and that is this camera.
Objection!
Mr. Drebber, do you remember this camera?
But that is the camera from that fateful night.
Yes, we borrowed it from the House of Horrors. It's the camera you took with you to the cemetery that night, Mr. Drebber. And is that supposed to be significant? This kind of camera is rarely seen in our homeland, so my colleague and I were keen to examine it closely. We noticed that the lens extends forwards on the end of some bellows. Like this.
Hold it!
What's that? There, just on the bellows. It looks like a dark red stain. Ah! That's right. It's a rather conspicuous mark here on the bellows, in fact. Good lord, are you suggesting? Yes, my lord. It would appear to be a spatter of blood.
Something that could be confirmed with a simple chemical test. Isn't it right? Isn't that right, Dr. Scythe? It would be difficult to determine if it was human blood and not the blood of some animal. But yes, to test whether or not it's blood at all is simple enough.
I propose that Madame Tuspel's testimony was correct, and that on the night in question 10 years ago, you were spattered with blood from the gunshot wound. Well, And that furthermore, you really did witness the condemned professor emerging from his tomb. There's simply no way you could have forgotten such a traumatic experience. In other words, the only explanation is that you're trying to hide the fact that you saw the professor that night. But why? Why would he want to do that? Well, not for his own gain, it would seem. For whose then? Who could benefit? Mr. Drebber is obviously lying in order to protect somebody. My goodness, he's shielding someone? Yes, my lord, and clearly, it's someone who doesn't want the truth about the professor coming back to life to be exposed. Well, counsel, who is it then? Who is this witness trying to protect by lying about what he saw that night? Here we go. Boom! The obvious answer is Dr. Scythe. Scythe? Whatever do you mean? Imagine if the convict who'd been sentenced to death was not in fact killed. Imagine if that was to come to light. What are you insinuating? And imagine if the convict in question was the country's most hated mass murderer. If it was the professor... That would be an unprecedented scandal!
Objection!
This is beyond a joke. Need I point out that the dead cannot come back to life? What you're suggesting would mean that the execution never actually happened. Yes, that's exactly what it would mean.
Objection!
Once a man is sent to the gallows, he hangs. No one could escape, not in Great Britain.
Objection!
But the fact is, there was a witness to the fact that the man did escape his hanging. If that were really true, Counsel, the implications of misconduct would not stop at the supervising coroner. It would taint the honor of the entire judiciary, from the ground up. And it's exactly because of those monumental repercussions that Dr. Scythe would consent to any demand made of her by someone who threatened to expose the secret, even if it meant that being complicit in a crime. Even if that meant being complicit in a crime. You mean... I mean that Dr. Scythe wasn't collaborating in Mr. Drebber's wicked scheme. She was coerced into collaborating, in order to protect her decade-old secret. She switched the dead body of Mr. Asmund with the waxwork model and fabricated the autopsy report. Ah! We getting the axe kick on this one. He's pissed. Lord Van Zeeks! Pray forgive my freshly filled hollowed chalice, and a whole raft of other discourtesies now. Goodness me! It's just the sort of tall tale the Londoners would enjoy, I grant you. An executed killer rising from the dead, a Scotland Yard cover-up, a conspiracy at the highest levels. So let me ask you one thing. What's that? If the condemned man really did emerge from his tomb that night, only to be shot in the chest, who pulled the trigger and disposed of him forever? Well, I have no idea at the moment. Oh, that's right. He was shot in the chest, too. Huh. So that actually matches up with the stab wound. It's a different, like, entry wound size and all that stuff. But forensics, gotta remind yourself that forensics are in its infancy at this time. I think they would be able to tell the difference between being shot and being stabbed, but not if the coroner covers it up. Right? Well, I have no idea at the moment.
We have too little information to work that out at present, I think.
I couldn't agree more. The Old Bailey is no place for wild fantasies. And have you considered this, my learned Nipponese friend? Considered what? Do you realize just what a dangerous endeavor it would be to coerce this woman into such criminal activity? It's tantamount to declaring war on the entire British police force and judiciary. Quite. Hard to imagine any sum of money being offered for research could warrant it.
To rely on some stage deception when so much is at stake would be madness.
Well, I suppose. And this was no petty crime either. The victim was murdered. A man who'd already invested money into the venture and would be instrumental in future profits too.
Yes, I had no reason to kill Mr. Asmund at all. Or are you forgetting that his death results in me receiving not a single penny?
Oh, you had a reason to kill him.
The court is already aware of the contract between myself and the victim, no?
Way to bring that up. There is the contract, that's very true. The motive for this case runs deep, though. I can feel it.
Using threats to force the head of the head of the forensic investigation team to cooperate is extreme, especially for a government grant he had no guarantee of receiving in the first place.
If the research grant was the aim, taking Asmund's life would have made no sense anyway, which means Mr. Drebber's motive wasn't money at all. He was just trying to kill Mr. Asmund. But why? What was his motive then? Oh, I know why. Your time is up, my learned friend. I'd say you have one last chance before the jury lose their patience with this charade. Let's see if you can back up your heady proposals, shall we? He dodged out of the way so he could throw it! How do you explain why this engineer would throw all caution to the wind and threaten his own country? At this point, I'm not prepared to listen to more of this outlandish conjecture without proof. So, counsel, present your evidence. Alright, who exactly was Mr. Asmund Drebber? There's a connection there that no one's seen yet, and I'm going to have to present 2 pieces of evidence and to show what it is. And I can present both of them. Pretty easy. Yes, my lord. The evidence that establishes a motive and explains why the witness wanted the victim dead is right here, and it will be presented in the next episode, because this one is just about time. So, whew, we got we got through that by guessing, but we got through it. And, yeah. Overall, pretty fun stuff. And we're about to blow this wide open. And it's going to be really fun when we do, because I cannot wait for the reveals. The reveals that are yet to come in this case. And hopefully we're going to get a few of them in the next episode. So, yeah. Waiting for that one. So, that's going to be it for now. Thank you guys very much for watching. Comment saying things that you like and things that you dislike, things I can change. I'm always looking for feedback. And then, yeah, and subscribe for future uploads. Going to be playing Kirby on the 25th when it comes out. So, excited for that. See you guys later. Bye-bye.